Welcome to Inner Landscapes, the podcast where we explore our inner worlds, modern life, ancient wisdom, creativity, healing, and running an alternative business.
Inner landscapes.
Hello, lovely listeners, and welcome back to episode 2 of Inner Landscapes. Today, we're going to be thinking all things around spring. But before we dive in, we're going to start with a little bit of somatic settling from Martyna. So over to you, babes. Take us away.
Okay, welcome to episode 2. Really happy to have you here. I just wanted to invite you before you dive in to take a couple of moments and look around whichever space you are in. If it's a room, just look into the 4 corners of your room. If you are outside, look around you, look at the trees, look at the ground. And after you've done that, or while you're doing that, just listen to the sounds around you, to the sounds outside, the sounds inside you. Maybe there is an aroma that comes through your nose as well, or maybe there's a taste in your mouth. Just notice it as well as noticing what's at your fingertips. So just really want you to focus on the sensation in your hands as well. And just stay here with all these senses activated for a moment longer. You can close your eyes and continue listening, tasting, smelling, and feeling the sensations in your fingers. And when you're ready, either open your eyes, or if you don't close your eyes, just come back into the space that you're in and join us for the rest of this episode.
Oh, that was beautiful. And I didn't even think about it before we started, but obviously we're in the season of spring. I mean, if you're listening to this podcast at another time, you might not be in the season of spring, but we are as we're recording this. And there's this beautiful light coming in through the bedroom window. And it was so nice to just take this second now to just really appreciate this moment of the season. So that was perfect. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
So our podcast is called Inner Landscapes, and one of the things that we explore is how our inner landscapes are kind of constantly shifting and changing. And we are starting our session with this exact topic this week. So what's your inner landscape looking like, feeling like this week, Martyna?
It's feeling tender. I think 2 days before my bleed, and because I work with my cycle a lot, there's like this element of the veil between this world and almost like the world of the spirits, or whatever you want to call it, is getting thinner. So I feel like I'm getting more connected with myself. I have like a sense of like a feeling of oneness with the world, but I'm also very delicate and almost like balancing those different energies. So there's a lot of creativity, but there's also like a need for going inwards and being a recluse a little bit. Yeah. What about you? What's your inner landscape like this week?
So last week I said that I felt a bit like I was on a boat and that the everything underneath was quite unsettled and in motion. And then very soon after we recorded that podcast, I then had, I think, quite a big moment of suffering, I guess, over the weekend afterwards, where my head just got so busy with all of these thoughts and that feeling of being on a ship that was on a journey somewhere suddenly really shifted and it became like a much more kind of sinister in a landscape, almost like I was kind of stuck in this stormy moment. And in the past, I think that would have lingered with me for quite a long time. But since kind of going on quite a healing journey over the last 6 months, or a little bit longer probably, I could just kind of see it that bit more clearly. And so I feel like everything is managed to kind of part in a way that was much smoother and less dramatic than it would have been in the past. And I feel like I've come out the other side and like the sky is just really bright above me. And I feel really solid, which is very different to how it was last time we had this conversation. I also feel
Mm-hmm.
tender, like when you said that word, that really resonated with me. So I feel this kind of real softness and this sort of gentleness that's come from that recovery. But I also feel like my roots are really dug into the ground. So it's a good feeling. I'm really enjoying it at the moment.
That's such a great visual. I love roots and just the visual idea of those metaphorical roots that connect us to the earth is something that I find like really kind of like meaty. Like it's a really meaty visual. You can attach so much to it and yeah, can make you feel really good.
Definitely.
I love that. I'm curious, I need to ask. So I'm curious, have you been tracking your cycle and linked the storm to the cycle at all? Has there been any like, yeah,
Yeah,
stuff?
definitely. For listeners, I joined Martyna for a menstrual cycle awareness workshop a few months ago. And in this workshop, part of it for me, my intention afterwards was wanting to keep a much more attentive eye on my cycle. And coming away from this, I mean, some of these things I feel really embarrassed to say them, but I know that loads of us experience this and it's totally fine. But I never knew that, for example, the first day of your bleed is the first day of your cycle. So for me, tracking your cycle was something that I never understood because I didn't understand what day one was, you know? So those kinds of sessions for me were really helpful in terms of thinking about what I'm actually paying attention to. And when I started tracking my cycle in this way, something we talked about in the workshop was that slightly closer attention to when you feel these emotional shifts or if you feel really tired, just noticing where you are in your cycle at this point in time. And I've definitely found that actually around my point where I'm ovulating is the same time where I normally have kind of like more shadow and kind of more fears and doubts and things that sneak in this moment. And that's become something really helpful to know because now when I have those moments, I'm also understanding that it's a lot to do with my body and my hormones. And it's not just that I suddenly don't trust myself, although it feels in that moment like I don't. So it's really helpful to have that link between the two things, definitely.
Oh, I love that. I love how you've embraced menstrual cycle awareness and making it your own as well.
Yeah, and it's the best. Like, I literally can't believe you know this already, I think, but I was on some form of contraceptive from the age of, I think, 15 or 16 until I was 30. I think I had my coil removed. And I used to use the contraceptive as a way to like cheat my nature. So I would just run from one pill packet to the next one and not let myself have a break and not let myself have a bleed. And I honestly thought like I had won at life. I was like, haha, you haven't got me. I've got you. I know exactly how to control all of these situations. And it's definitely now that I'm living in tune with my cycle, I feel more, which could feel like a burden at moments, but also is a really
Mm.
beautiful thing because this is life. But it just made me realize that I don't know, like I missed out on so many experiences probably from like trying to cheat it in the past, but we can't go back and change that, of course. I'm just fully embracing it as much as possible now.
Wow. I feel like this is already such a potent conversation and we could make it all about the first bleed, but we're not going to do that. However, I feel like it's a great starting point. So basically today we wanted to weave in the archetype of the maiden, which is one of the three archetypes of the triple goddess. It's something that I work with in my work, but lots of different practitioners use it with lots of different modalities as well. So a triple goddess is maiden, mother, crone. And today we're going to work with the maiden, which is basically an embodiment of a young woman, a teenager. I would say with elements of inner child. However, the inner child is within us at all times and through all archetypes that we embody as well. We sort of already began linking it to the hormones and the bleed, but you know how passionate I am about this and how I think it's the foundation of everything. Our experiences as human beings entering womanhood slash maidenhood are probably very much they're more nuanced than just that. So I wanted to start by asking you, what was your entry into that period, that spring of your life like?
I'm just going to ask one quick question first. Womanhood and maidenhood is the same thing, or this is like different phases?
I would say different phases. However, it's almost like the lines are a little bit blurred. So, typically when we get our first periods, people say to us, congrats on becoming a woman. But
Mhm.
really, you're still a maiden. So you are a young girl transitioning slowly into womanhood. So it is a beginning of your womanhood, but there's that period of maidenhood, which maybe is until like your early 20s. For as long as your brain is developing, that's my theory. Don't quote me on that, but I feel like that could be, where I would put a line. And then you become like a full blown woman and move more towards your mother archetype later in life.
Okay, so now we're thinking maidenhood, and what was my transition into maidenhood like?
Yeah, an early womanhood, I would
Yeah,
call it
yeah.
as well. Yeah.
So I think I maybe have like quite a few layers within it because I remember I can like literally remember the day when I got my first bleed, and I can remember like the house because me and my family moved a lot, but I can remember the house that we were in and how it felt, and I was very excited that finally I had it. Um, but it was also a time where I was competing a lot. So I used to do modern pentathlon, which is running, swimming, shooting, fencing, and horse riding. So I was training like every morning before school, every day after school, and every weekend going to competitions. So I feel like my that part of like moving towards womanhood was very much, in some ways, I guess, stilted because my body was under such intense strain or like effort. I don't know what the right word is, but I think it's really common for people like sports people that they're a little bit, their development is affected by the amount of effort that you are putting your body through all the time. And I remember also at this time, like I used to get loads of comments about from sort of boys at school that would ask me if I was on steroids and things like that, just because I was very like, I wasn't big, but I was so strong and I was so fit and I had like very clearly defined muscles and everything. And so it was this really funny time where I didn't feel, I was excited about the fact that I was starting to have my period. I didn't really know what that meant. I was doing a lot of sport and was a bit confused about my body, but I was also already in a relationship from the age of 15 to 18 and like very deeply in love. And so there was like, it was all a very confusing time of feeling really first love and lust and like desired in this way, but then also like a well-oiled machine that has to kind of like really compete and be strong in another way, which is not very like gentle and feminine energy. And then on the
Mm,
other side, a little bit felt like my cycle and stuff was very separate from me. Like it was
mhm.
there, I was excited about it, but it wasn't something that had a big space in my life, I guess. How about you?
Mm. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I feel like there's a common thread, and our listeners will hear that those stories of girlhood mirror each other. So I also felt quite disconnected from what my period was. Like I knew it was something to celebrate, but I didn't really have like the right environment almost, because it was almost brushed to the side. Okay, now it's done. But then what about the rest of it? Like, who am I becoming now? So, didn't feel like there was a lot of support with that from my family. Not that they weren't supportive, but they just took it in their stride, like this is what it is now. In retrospect, I almost feel like I could have been more celebrated and initiated in a way without like blaming them, but just, so as a society, we don't really know how to do that. So
I'm sure that like your parents didn't do that because that was something that didn't exist for them, right? Because for mine, that was also like I remember being explained how to use sanitary products and stuff like this. But I think I had
mm,
much more of a conversation around because I was in a relationship, like just use the contraceptive and don't get pregnant was the conversation far more than
hmm
this is your cycle and this is what's happening to you there. So my parents were amazingly open in terms of talking about relationships, and we had
hmm
great loads of conversation around all of these kinds of things. But in terms of like cycle and what all of that meant and the changes in my body, and I guess also your how you identify and like how you feel about yourself, it all changes quite a lot in that time, doesn't it?
massively. I think so for me, it was the body image as well that was quite like that transition from, being called chicken legs to suddenly my hips going whoop and, everyone commenting on my butt going like shapely and bigger and me just being extremely self-conscious. So it was just like this, like I just remember this really like tangible consciousness or awareness of your butt is growing, your boobs aren't. Like, who are you? Like, are you half boy, half some kind of siren? Like, what's happening here? Like just really almost like confused identity and a lack of conversations around sex and love. And I was quite a late bloomer. I didn't really have a boyfriend until I was 20. I had a boyfriend when I was 12, but I don't really count him as, yeah. We kissed once and held hands in the hall once. But I was very romantic and there was support for my emotional landscape in a way, but there weren't enough conversations. So when I say in a way the support was there, is that, if I was upset about something, if there was a boy that I liked, I could still talk to my family, my parents about it. I say my family because I also grew up with my granddad and he wasn't, he saw me as this academic child that was there to, pursue like an academic career.
Mm.
So kind of similar to like the pressures that you had of, being a high performing athlete. I had to be a high performing student because it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. They saw that I was not special, but you know what I mean? Like they saw that I was high
Gifted.
achieving. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, of course I'm special. I mean, no,
Yeah, you're very special, Martyna.
so they could see that I'm high achieving, and then it's almost like you have to feed into that. So you have to then high achieve because they've already labeled you as high achieving. And by them, I mean family, friends, teachers, your environment. So it felt like there was time for play, but I also feel like I've just always worked really hard. And even though things came to me easily, as in I had multiple talents, like I was a child artist exhibiting and stuff, and I danced. Like there was just always a lot. I feel like there wasn't, yeah. But then again, who's to say that you can't be good at your hobbies? But equally, I wish they remembered something that I was really bad at. Oh, actually, yeah, I did try to play guitar and I gave up after a month. So, so there was basically just permission to just explore and play and not always be good at something and not always be high achieving, I think is something that I can't quite grasp from my memories, about
Yeah.
my maidenhood.
And I think you're completely right that that will be repeated for everybody, probably, because at that phase in your life, in your like teens, there's already so much pressure from institutions in terms of just education and stuff like this to kind of diversify in your subjects that you study and the areas that you're good in. And it's all about figuring out what direction you're going to go into adulthood. And there's a lot of pressure to kind of like form something out of yourself in this time. But hearing you
Yeah.
say this is really making me think like all of my friends at school, everybody had something that they were pursuing and that they had, I don't mean pressure in a bad way, but there was some kind of pressure there in order to figure out if that's their thing or if this is your path or this is the direction that you're going to go in. There's a lot of
Mhm.
externals, aren't there, during that particular period of time?
Yeah, and I think that speaks to the fact that spring as a season is that time of new energy and new seeds sprouting, which means it's it's almost like it's exposed. It's exposed to whatever happens next because it's a slow emergence, but because of the rise in energy, there's a lot of expectation of this has to happen now and this has to happen to a particular standard or level. And I think that's definitely reflected in the journey of the maidenhood. Like it's the light of it is the playfulness, the joy, the curiosity, the creativity. You know, you're like a sponge, you just absorb everything. But that's also the shadow of it. It's that you absorb everything.
Yeah. And it's a really distracting time as well. When
Mm.
you were talking about this as being spring again, I then just had an image of being like in the woods going for a walk on the weekend, and how when you walk through now, everything is just stopped being brown and it's like a lot more green and there's loads of sprouts. But there's so many different types of plants growing everywhere, and there's all the insects, and there's all of the tweeting of birds, and there's all of the blossom on the trees. Like there's a lot of stuff going on around you as well as within you, isn't there?
Yeah.
And like you said about suddenly your body shape was changing and people were commenting on it. And for me as well, people like making comments on my muscly physique and stuff. Those voices, I think, suddenly become far more present than they were in the past because internally you perhaps feel a bit more self-conscious or vulnerable or like
Mm.
uncertain. So I guess the voices of from your parents with expectations of where you're going to go, also from your teachers, from your peers, from the people that you fancy, from the people that you really don't fancy, but maybe they fancy you, and all of these kinds of things. Like there's so much stuff going on in that moment in time. It's actually kind of chaotic.
Yeah, yeah, massively chaotic. That's so true. But at the same time, you know, what you were saying earlier about like being in the storm and then how grounded you felt afterwards. I feel like this
Mm.
is a beautiful analogy for the rainbow coming out after the storm. Like there's just so much harvest to be taken throughout the chaos of spring almost. Just using it as a using spring as a metaphor for new beginnings as well. What is your relationship with spring like? We sort of touched upon it, but if you could expand on that a little bit more.
And now we're talking spring as a season.
Spring as a season, and spring as a metaphor for new beginnings, spring as a as an umbrella of those different things that we just discussed.
Yeah, yeah. Um, for me, spring as a season is like such a beautiful time. I just love seeing the days lengthening and everything starts to feel a bit more hopeful and exciting. Um, and I'm somebody that is very easily distracted by new life. So I love the thing of just noticing like when the daisies pop out and the blossom on the trees, and then when you see the first bee that's come to visit them, and like all of these little things. So in terms of like the natural seasons, spring is 100% my vibe. But then if we think about spring in terms of like more internal stuff, I find spring quite a difficult, or I find new beginnings, I guess, still quite challenging because I think I am an ideator and I love kind of like bouncing ideas around and I love the energy of like starting something new. But I also am not, I'm somehow not disciplined and overly disciplined with trying to then like shape that into something. I think I'm still shedding the kind of the habit or the need to have some kind of control within a situation and to like force it into making sense. So I think I'm trying to find a way to just enjoy that kind of spring feeling, that new beginning feeling, and to trust myself in order to go through that process Whereas sometimes it's like all good, and then suddenly like immobilizing, oh my God, but what happens next? And like, where do I go from this? But I think that this is all a part of my definitely like the inner work that I'm doing at the moment is just developing that trust of, lean into it, don't force it. You've got this, take the time, listen to the energy, listen to your body, listen to the moment and just enjoy
Mhm.
it. I
Mm.
was actually journaling a lot the last few days to kind of overcome the head spin that I went into. And I realized that my biggest fear at the moment is just passing through life and kind of like going through the motions, not being present and not feeling things. But my default is to be like, okay, let's do, logical order, like move forward. And then you don't feel and you're not present and you're not being. So I've got like quite an internal conflict, I guess, around this particular kind of new beginning and starting things and trusting myself. I'm working on it. I could say I'm working on it.
I love that, Alice, because I feel like it's very similar for me. And again, it's a reflection of that yin and yang, light and shadow of each season. I love spring because April is my birth month, so it's my season basically. And I love the rise in energy, and I can really feel that slow um emergence that I talked about, that it's not yet like full steam. It's like, okay, slowly, we will get there. But the shadow side of it that I feel very deeply is that feeling of uncertainty that I don't know yet what's going to come out of this season. Will I get enough speed on my bike kind of thing to get to the end of the year and be like, oh, that was really, rich and I've created so much. And I think a lot of it is linked to creativity. And I mean that in every aspect of life, just creating the life that I want for myself. And how at the beginning of spring, there's this feeling of like, have you done enough in winter? And that's something that I'm constantly working with and
Mm,
trying to make peace with. By working with it, yeah, it's the peace part, but also I think you mentioned like self-trust, that I am doing enough, that I am still present to the experience is exactly what you said too. Like if I'm always trying to fulfill those different needs of each season, am I actually here? So um when I think about new beginnings though, there is this like tingly feeling of, oh, this is great. I don't know what's going to happen. So the uncertainty is actually exciting and, it feeds me in a different way. So it really sometimes depends on like shifting the perspective and not actually changing the environment, the situation, or the literal landscape around me. Yeah, also quite nuanced, I guess.
yeah, I just want to ask you for 1 second because obviously new beginnings comes after the end of something and spring comes after winter. And you just said that sometimes you have this moment where I'm like, have I done enough over winter? But winter should be a time of deep rest and things like this. So what exactly does that mean for you when you say, have I done enough over winter?
So it's almost like, have I planted enough? I mean, this is going to go like if we were talking to someone who works in agriculture, they would be like, what are you talking about? But
We're only in
metaphorically,
metaphors,
yeah,
yeah.
because you're not exactly planting the seeds in winter, but metaphorically you do. So it's like it's preparing for that blossoming and blooming. And I don't mean have I done enough in like the toxic productivity sense, but
Mm,
more like have I set the scene for the more active time? Um, so yeah, still honoring the slowness of the season, the winter season, but with this awareness of like, okay, but it's important for me and for my well-being and for, my business and just me as a human being to lay the foundations of what this next season is going to be like.
yeah. And I think that that in a funny way actually speaks back to what we were saying about maidenhood and stuff, isn't it? That
Mm.
perhaps there could have been more done. And again, this is not placing blame on anyone, but it's more like a comment on society and how we deal with this kind of puberty period. That there could be more done to lay the foundations for helping young people in that particular period to figure out their direction and what's happening to them and why they're feeling the way that they're feeling and all of these kinds of things. It comes back to all to foundations, I guess, there.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. So now linking it to our businesses, what would you say the spring of your business felt like? And yeah.
I think the spring of my business felt horribly unsettled, a little bit like perhaps being pulled from the womb too early, if I was going to be totally honest about it. It kind of started accidentally already, but very much as a small side thing, just with teaching creative writing every now and then. And then me and my husband cycled from Slovenia to England. It took us a month and we were like camping the whole way and totally on our own, and it was really amazing. And afterwards I just had this moment of like real epiphany where I just felt that the things that I was doing with writing and art was so much more fulfilling and so much more my purpose than the other things that I was doing, which was language teaching. So I already had this feeling, and then I came home, and everybody that I'd been teaching English suddenly didn't want lessons anymore. So I actually had zero backup work. And so I had this amazing realization where I was like, that's my purpose, that's where I'm going to go. But then this horrendous reality of like, you've got to work that out quickly and like find a way to make this happen and to like make a business make sense. Um, so luckily I was still working at my local university at the time, teaching creative writing as like a side thing, not as a lecturer. And that kind of like sustained me through that period. But I didn't really make a conscious decision that I want to start a business and I'm going to slowly prepare for it. It was like, here's the frying pan, and I was just chucked into the middle. But this is also kind of the story of my life. It's the same how I ended up living in Slovenia. It's the same how I ended up teaching. Like it's all a repeating cycle. So but it is becoming different and it's becoming definitely more intentional every time, but there's repetitions there. But yeah, so the spring period of my business was very, very uncomfortable. Although I also feel like now I've been in my business for just over a year, and I definitely feel like I'm in the next cycle of spring. And this spring, right now, with everything that I've learned and then kind of put to bed and let rest and stuff, and all the new things that are coming in, this is a beautiful part of my business. It still feels very uncertain, but it feels far more rooted and like the garden has kind of it's got some established something there, so better things are going to grow from it. So yeah, this time round spring is pretty tasty. And what about for the kind space?
Oh, it's been interesting for the kind space because I almost feel like I haven't fully like entered that early stage of business until last year, even though I've been a business owner as a photographer for I think 13 years. I've always had other jobs to like support the business. And then last year, I was on year three of maybe running circles and doing menstrual cycle awareness workshops. And actually, a year ago, I qualified as a menstrual cycle coach. And this is almost when I said, okay, now that's the beginning. Even though the official date of like starting my business, I set to November the year prior, or like 2022, I think, because that's when I started doing the in-person workshops in London. So it's all a bit, as you can already hear, it's all a bit like hectic energy, lots of excitement. Oh, let's start this, let's start here. I mean, the mission and the vision and the direction were clear, but it was just like, do I say this is now a business? Is it still my passion project? So there was a bit of kind of blurred lines around that. But I would say fully consciously, spring last year, and it felt Again, yeah, it was messy, it was hectic because I've just come back from India and I was meant to be like super refreshed and enter what I would at the time actually refer to as the spring of my life because I've had a surgery for my endometriosis the year prior. I recovered from the surgery. I went to India to recover even more, and then I got really sick when I was in India. So somehow, against all odds, I did manage to start coaching and building my business. But again, I threw myself into it really fast, and there was a lot of not uncertainty. Well, there was a lot of uncertainty, but there was also a lot of that frantic energy, those almost like raging hormones, like, oh, I need to do this. I want to do this. I want to do everything. And I really needed to slow that down. So by summer, I was, I suppose, like more aware. And I mean, by summer season, but still being in the spring of my business. I was more aware of what I was doing, what I wanted to do going forward. And yeah, I still feel like I am at the beginning of this journey as much as I am also, a seasoned, you could say, business owner. I'm still learning. So it's almost like the beginner's mind is always there. And I try to not put myself in this, high seat of like, I know it all now. But equally, it's the first year. Is it the first year? So yeah, so since spring last year, I've been solely living from freelancing and not trying to get another job to supplement it. So it almost feels like I am new, but I am not new.
Well, it's a new iteration, I guess,
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah.
Because I also last year, I think around April last year, I stopped transcribing. Like I made a really conscious effort that I didn't want to do that particular type of work anymore, and I wanted creative tea breaks to be everything. And then by the time it got around to October, with all of that frantic energy, I was then like, oh my God, like I need something stable in my life. And so I tried to go back into having transcribing as a side hustle. And I think I lasted a month. And the woman that was running this organization was so amazing. And she had this really cool ethos in her business around making the work accessible. And she was intentionally hiring people that were neurodivergent or had disabilities, like that weren't being given great opportunities in other places. Like amazing, amazing, amazing business and idea. And so luckily, because she was so cool, I could just phone her up and say, like, I'm really sorry, I tried this and I thought it was the right thing to do, but I just realized very quickly this is totally not where I am right now. And I'm trying to again force something into a place where it doesn't have space. And she was amazing in this conversation. But I think in a way that was almost like its own tiny little cycle of shedding the thing that I didn't need financially, like I needed it, but energetically, it really wasn't helpful having that transcribing work at the
Mm.
beginning of last year. So, like shedding it and then trying it on my own and then going back to it and seeing and being like, no, that wasn't the right thing. Like, and it just feels like these constant kind of cycles and iterations of just figuring out and feeling the way of how it's supposed to all work. But I also think, like you said, that you haven't got to this point where you're like, okay, now I know everything. I don't think we will ever have this, but also not in a negative way, just in a, I think that both of us are aware and lots of people are aware that things are constantly changing and nothing stays the same. So there's never going to be a
Mm.
point where you just do have everything. And maybe the key is in learning to embrace the spring season, the new beginnings, and to harness this energy that has, for both of us, felt frantic and overwhelming in the past.
Yeah, I love that you said about not needing things or like creating space energetically, even if you needed the money, because I think we both have a similar mindset that, what you almost like don't give space to energetically, it's not going to happen. So sometimes you have to, well, spring is about taking risks. So I feel like that also feeds in nicely with what we've done, like the risks of not taking that other job or I mean, I've done it so many times with photography that I went back to a job that just wasn't aligned to support it. But that's for another story. But Yeah, I feel like energetically sitting with that, going back to the maiden archetype, it's an archetype that we all still carry within us, and it can be an inspiration or it can be some sort of deterioration. Is that the right word? Or like it
Hmm.
can hinder our journey as well. It depends what we pay attention to. And by paying attention to, I mean like energetically tuning in to those feelings and sensations that, have the power to really guide us on our journey, whether it's in life or in business.
Yeah, and really give us momentum in the direction that we want to go. Because I was also just thinking that it could sound like if we say we chose to not do something that we needed in inverted commas financially because we were following the energy. And to some people, that would sound like, oh, well, lucky you, you could afford to not do that thing and do the other thing. But that's actually not the case, I don't think. And for most people, it's not. It's all about learning, I guess. And maybe this is where actually, after this session, I'm going to really sit down with myself and perhaps congratulate myself because it's about trusting that if you put the energy into this thing, it is going to grow. And it was really hard not to have that financial security of the other job, but I was going to destroy myself if I continued doing all of it. And for me, the vision of making my business work was more important than having that extra bit of finances at the time. So I would just kind of cut back more on spending in order to put all of the energy into the direction that I really wanted to go in. So maybe we
Yeah.
do actually trust ourselves more than we think.
Yeah, that's a lovely thought to sit with because kind of it's almost like I mirror what you have done, or my story mirrors what you have done because I left London for a few months because it was either leaving and living in a more affordable way or just taking any job to keep going. And I
Hmm.
just knew that was not going to serve myself or anyone in my orbit. The good of the people that I'm trying to serve.
But that's
Nearly.
also a hard
Yeah.
decision to make, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
London is an amazing city to be in. I used to live in London as well. I don't live there now. I live in Slovenia, and it's much more affordable where I am now. I could never, and this is one of the things actually that I think was kind of the biggest blessing of moving out of London and moving to another country is that my options were so reduced, but also the cost of living was less. And so I could do these radical things that I had never even thought for a second about doing when I was at home. If I had stayed in the UK, I know 100% at this point in my life, I would not have the business that I'd made. I might be thinking
Mm.
about it because I really do believe that this is my purpose. So it would have emerged
Hmm.
at some point. But at this point in time, I wouldn't have figured out everything that I have already figured out if I had stayed there.
Wow. Yeah, I
But
love
like
that
not living in London is a sacrifice. It's an amazing place to be. There's so much richness and greatness
massively.
there.
Yeah. So again, it's like giving something up so you can gain something and, making those decisions and
Weighing the
um
value.
yeah, weighing the value and leaning on the self-trust.
Yeah. Yes. I'm feeling this.
I love that. So I prepared a short meditation or visualization to help our listeners connect deeper with the inner maiden, the spring archetype within. Yeah, I think we should end on that. We've discussed so many topics now within the spring topic. There's loads. There's loads of
Yeah.
richness here. Okay, so I'll just give you a second to get comfortable, whoever's listening, or if you walk in, you can just visualize this or see it with your mind's eye as you are walking and listening to this podcast. But if you can, sit down and close your eyes for a couple of minutes. So I want to invite you to visualize yourself journeying into a beautiful meadow. The air is crisp, the sun is just starting to rise, and you begin to awaken and step out into a quiet and serene landscape. Everything is beginning to wake up. What can you see, smell, touch, taste? I want you to really tune into your body's sensations. And as you look around this landscape, see a woman in the distance. She is coming towards you. She's surrounded by the light of the sun, enveloped in the yellow light, connected to your solar plexus chakra, which is linked to your joy, pleasure, your personal power. This woman coming towards you is your inner maiden, your inner young woman that lives within you and has a deep connection to joy, curiosity, creativity, intuition. Just notice what she looks like. She's coming much closer towards you now. Just imagine what she's wearing, what her hair looks like, and see the light that envelops her. Is there anything that you would like to ask her? Or maybe there's something that you'd like to share with her? Just listen for any messages that might emerge. I invite you to spend a couple of more moments here just looking at your inner maiden. And tuning into whatever wisdom she's come here to share with you. When you're ready, thank her for visiting you and sharing whatever gift she brought today for. And as she walks away into the light, spend a few more moments with this feeling that she left with you, or maybe a message that she gifted, or that you were able to receive from her. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes or just continue going about your day and come back into the space that you're in.
Super beautiful. Thank you, Martina. I just had the weirdest experience during that where I felt like my left eye, I could see the field and the sun and the kind of edge of a face, but I felt like I had an eye patch on and I couldn't, like, my vision was almost being eclipsed or something. And I've only ever had this experience once before when I was working with Charisse Bishram, and she does these amazing visualizations. And once I just had this cloud of color over the top of it, so I couldn't see. And I feel like I've really had that same experience today.
Wow.
Which is really, so before Charisse had told me maybe that was something to do with something that I wasn't saying, because she thought it was linked to my throat chakra, and that there was something around this experience that needed to be explored. And I feel the same for this one today. I was trying to speak to my inner maiden, but she had no voice. And I was just kind of putting my hand to her cheek and just saying, like, babe, I'm here, we're okay. I think I need to spend some time with this part of myself, definitely. Because if I
Yeah.
go to visit my inner child in a visualization, she's there. I see her, like, we interact. And also with myself now, and even with my future self. But I think that there's something today that is definitely come up in terms of a part of my timeline that needs some love and attention.
I love that. This is so juicy.
Have you ever experienced something like that before?
Yes, I have in different ways. Yeah, not like specifically like an image being obscured, but almost like the messaging being blocked, or, a feeling of blockage, or of not being able to express within the body. So yeah, very kind of could be very subtle, or it could be quite strong. So yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know, because
Yeah.
obviously I knew that I'd had this experience before, so it didn't scare me today, but I was also like, this is
Yeah.
really bizarre. So for anyone else that's
Wow.
listening that perhaps has also got some filter over their vision, this is nothing to be concerned about, but definitely is something that we should give some extra thought and attention to,
Mm.
maybe in a little bit of journaling or just a little bit further investigation in this kind of visualization. Amazing. So that's the end of our spring episode. Thank you so much for kind of leading us through all of this amazing stuff, Martyna. It's been really cool. And we have one kind of tip for you following this session. So something that you can go away and do afterwards. So we were both having a think about how you could get in touch with this kind of maiden part of yourself and this kind of spring energy. And the instant thing that came to mind is movement and dance. So as we kind of adult, we become these slightly more rigid structures than we used to be. And just a little bit of movement, and kind of also sensual movement, and really thinking about connecting with where your curves move and how your body flows, and let your arms kind of go out to the side and float a little bit, and like really embrace that way that as a child we move so intuitively. And as Martyna beautifully put before this session, just dance like nobody's watching is basically our tip for you for after this session, for connecting with that spring maiden energy. Is there
Yeah.
anything else?
No, I think that's it. Yeah. I hope you, to the people listening, and you, Alice, I hope you enjoyed the practices. And yeah, we'd love to hear from you on how your journey with your maidenhood has gone, and your connection to spring as well. So if you'd like to share, we're always here to listen.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
actually, that's a good point. So, if you want to share anything that comes up after listening to this episode or the last episode, you can find Martyna on Instagram at,
The kind space.
and you
And
can find me on Instagram at creative_T_breaks. And we're going to put our links into the show notes so you can find us. And we'd love to just carry on this conversation. We're very much building a community here, and would love to hear from you.
yes, thank you so much for listening. Thanks again for listening to this episode of Inner Landscapes. If you enjoyed the episode and took something from it, we would be very grateful if you gave it a like or even subscribed to our channel. This is really helpful for other people finding our podcast in the future and expanding this community space. If you know somebody that would also benefit from listening to this kind of conversation and stepping a little bit closer to what's going on inside for them, then please do also share this episode with them. Building a community takes these kinds of small, loving actions, and we really appreciate anything that is shared and spread from this little space that we are creating right here. If you've got any questions, or you want to get in contact with us about exercises or things that you took away from the episode, then you can find us on Instagram. Alice is at creative_t_breaks, and I am at The Kind Space. Thanks again, and have a lovely rest of your day or night.
In a landscape